This is a brilliant session. I've been looking forward to this session for the longest while. Deep, you're slightly bottom of screen, so you may want to push the screen back.
Okay. Sorry, I don't have anything semi-formal or formal there.
Oh, this is perfect. Don't worry at all. So I have three gentlemen, one logging in from Madrid. George is coming in from Germany, am I right?
That's correct.
And Deep, you're in Switzerland, are you?
I'm in Zurich, that's right.
You're in Zurich. So I just now had Yatendra Singh from Geneva in the last show from Lausanne, right? So there you are. So these are names, they don't get better than them, right? I mean, we have Dr. Suman Bulla. Dr. Suman Bulla is so synonymous with the travel and tourism industry. Hi, Deepak.
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you. So,
Good to see you too. Hi,
I
Suman.
mean,
Hi, Deep.
yeah. So Dr. Suman Bulla needs no introduction. If you need an introduction to Dr. Suman Bulla, I would be compromising, right? Dr. Suman Bulla is a huge name. He was former Joint Secretary, Ministry of Tourism. Great credentials, both education, professional, the services, right? He's a great Indian administrator. He's now posted in Madrid after India won the UNWTO seat, and he's taken over the UNWTO assignment over there. Technically there till the end of next year. Dr. Bill, I shall leave the other part to Dr. Suman Bulla when he starts. I shall come to Deep. Well, Deep Kalra is one of the most successful entrepreneurs. May I say, if I may, the original startup, right? So he started young, and what a brand has he created. Deep is synonymous with Make My Trip, as is Make My Trip with Deep Kalra. And Rohit, I'm going to come to you at the last. Deepak Deva, Sita, travel and him go hand in hand together. A huge name in the industry. He needs no introduction. Anybody and everybody who's hearing the show knows him. George logs in from Germany. George, when are you coming back? Next week?
I'm coming back on 16th, yes.
Are you coming back on 16th? So he's headed back to India now. And George heads Lufthansa for the region. Am I right, George?
That's correct.
Absolutely. So what a name. And Rohit Khosla. Rohit Khosla is a genial hotelier, as I call him. Very polite, humble to a fault. Rohit will not remember. But then I used to be with Reliance Retainer and I used to stay at the Taj President. I stayed there for over 5 years. That was my home. I used to come back every Saturday to Delhi and go back every Tuesday to Bombay. And I used to live there. And Rohit used to be the general manager there. I think that was 2005, 6, 7, right? And then Pankaj Sampat took over. And then I had another stay with him at the Taj Samudra, right? He's an absolute giant of a hotelier. And Taj is in very good hands. When you get to know it is Rohit Khosla who's handling it. Yeah. Over to you, Suman. I will not take away the punch from your show. Dr. Bulla, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rohit. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a wonderful panel which is lined up for you. All of these gentlemen, as Bhuvnesh has said, need no introduction. They're all industry stalwarts who have been in the industry for long, and all of you have seen them and heard them. The focus that we are going to have in the session today is not to look at what damage the pandemic has done to the industry, and but I think the focus is going to be more on how are we going to restart tourism, because I think where we are now, we need to fight our way out of the morass. And I think I request all of the these best minds that are there with me to see as to how we can sort of make a cogent roadmap on how to come out of this problem, on how we can restart tourism as well. So Bhuvnesh has already introduced me. He said that I work at the UNWTO. So I am the director for the Departments of Technical Cooperation and Silk Road Development. So what the Department of Technical Cooperation does is it assists member states, member countries in their tourism sectors. So that's largely by way of advisory and by way of drawing up plans and roadmaps for them. Needless to say that in the current time, most of the work that we do is helping tourists, helping countries come out of the COVID-19 impact, and we are giving them recovery packages, we're preparing recovery packages, we're structuring deals for them with multilateral funding institutions. So this is some of the work that we do. So it also gives us an opportunity to look at which way the world is going and what examples that there are in the world. So all of us know that this is a crisis that is unprecedented and like none other that we have ever seen before. And the UNWTO estimates that international tourist arrivals will drop anywhere between 60 to 80% this year. So one way to understand the impact is to look at it from a historical perspective. In 2003, when we had the SARS epidemic, the international tourist arrivals contracted by 0.4%. In 2009, when we had the global economic crisis, the tourist arrivals contracted by 4%. Now we are looking at a drop of anywhere between 60 to 80%, and I think as the year unfolds, it looks more closer to the 80% mark rather than the 60% mark. So what this essentially means is that we are facing a situation, the drop is so steep that no business can have a business contingency plan to tide over an eventuality like this. And there is no government in the world which would be able to handhold its sector to navigate this pandemic without any pain. So essentially there is pain. But one of the things that we need to look at is that the global economic cues are also not looking too strong. The IMF estimates that this year the global GDP is likely to contract by 4.8%. And we've already seen the GDP numbers from India, and there is some amount of contraction happening there. So I think we know that there is going to be a little bit of pain ahead of us. But one of the things that we are all clear about, and there's every country in the world is focused on, is that tourism sector needs to restart desperately, because there are many floundering businesses, and there will be more that will go out of business, and we all know that it takes a lot more effort to bring a business back into play after it has gone out, because funding, financing, all of that are going to be issues. So I think the most critical thing is that we need to look at how to restart the sector. We know that in India, in most parts of India at least, the pandemic is peaking now, and by many accounts, and it is widely expected that the pandemic would have passed its peak by sometime in mid-October. So I think the challenge that we have in front of us, and I think the task that we have cut out, is to see as to how we can restart the tourism sector sometime in November, and using domestic tourism as the for growth. As far as international demand goes, we think that it's going to be the first quarter of 2021 before demand starts firming up. I think the biggest challenge that we have and the choice that we have to make is that we will have to restart the tourism sector even without the luxury of a vaccine. Because even if it takes the end of the year or even later for a vaccine to be developed, we all know by this time that it's not going to be a silver bullet. It will not be a sterilizing vaccine, but it will be one which can reduce mortality. So I think we will need to put in strong safety and hygiene protocols to reassure the traveler that it is okay to travel and his health will not be compromised when he travels. And I think the important reason why we need to start with domestic strongly is that it sends out a strong signal to the world that India is safe, and then it's easier, it's safe for people to travel to India now. One of the factors that we overlook is we receive 11 million international tourists into India every year, but we also send out 24 million every year from India to the world. And these 24 million people spend an estimated amount of $25 billion a year. And I think that is the critical mass of purchasing power that is resting within the country. And I think it is this critical mass that we need to intelligently tap into. And if we are able to harness this, I think the pain in the tourism sector can largely be managed. So I think if we are looking at a November restart, we also need to look at a revival package, because most of the countries have done in the first flush of the pandemic is not really a revival package, but they have actually put money into the pockets of businesses and into the pockets of people who have lost their jobs. A revival package is more into induce and stimulate demand and see as to how we can kick out of our way from where we are. So I think the industry needs to have a reasonable set of suggestions with which to go to the government, and I think we need to say these are some of the things that we would require from the government to do if we have to reclaim the space that we had earlier and see as to how we can grow beyond where we were before. And I think when we do this recovery package, one of the things that we need to also understand is that the governments are in as bad a shape as the industry is. We all know that tax revenues have been contracting, and that's not just peculiar to India, that's happening all across the world. So governments are also in a difficult position. So I think when we draft that policy suggestion for the government, we need to look at policy fixes rather than financial support. Financial support is fine, not to put it out of the box yet, but I think we need to look at policy fixes. And to my mind, there are 4 pillars on which we need to get policy interventions to restart tourism. And 4 of these gentlemen who are sitting with me are those who have been championing those ideas, so I will get them in to put in their word as we go along. I think the first pillar that is critical for restarting tourism is going to be ease of travel. Unless we are able to create good and effective travel environment through robust gatekeeping, which means that we will require all of the states in the country to have common health protocols. Because one of the biggest challenges to traveling today is that you travel from state A to state B, you're not sure if you're likely to get quarantined in that state. And you don't know what is it that you need to, are you required to take a PCR test? Are you required to, go into institutional quarantine, home quarantine? So none of these things are clear now. So I think if we are able to get over the pandemic by about middle of October, and then the situation comes under control, we need to have a common protocol in place across the country. And I know that Deep has been working on this for some time. And my suggestion is that it is the industry which should prepare the zero draft and then pose it to the government. Because when it is left to either the state or the center to propose a draft, governments tend to take partisan positions. So I think it's, for discussion's sake, it's good for the industry to propose a draft, and then everybody can discuss it, and we could look at how to take that forward. Some of the things that we see happening in the world is several countries are now opening up with PCR tests. There is a rapid antigen tests are being deployed now, which has a success which has a predictability of 96%. Now they're also talking about immunity certificates. Those who have already got the infection and who are unlikely to get reinfected can possibly come with a copy of the serology test. There's also new technology that is developing. Israel has deployed a technology in India which is under trials, in which through a breathalyzer they will be able to tell you within 10 minutes on whether you have coronavirus or not. And we have the examples in Frankfurt Airport where they have set up an entire testing system, and they will give you the result in 4 hours. So if you need to catch a flight, you can go to the airport sufficiently early, get your test done, take your result, and then go on to board the aircraft. So these are some things that is happening across the world. But I think, as the UAE government says, it's important for us to safety first and tourism next. We cannot compromise on the safety of the host community by allowing tourists who may be carrying infection. So I think good gatekeeping is essential, but it is also absolutely essential to make sure that we prescribe what the requirements are beforehand, and we make it as painless and as predictable as possible. The second element in this is that we need to have any policy that we bring in, we need to bring it in with only prospective effect. because there will be destinations which may be having a higher level of infection, which may warrant certain kind of health regulations to come in. But I think whatever decision we take, we need to do it with a prospective basis, because we've had the case few weeks ago of the Netherlands. They had allowed tourists from Croatia to come into the country when without any gatekeeping. And once they came in, they said that the cases in Croatia are going up. So everybody who comes in from there have to go into institutional quarantine. So essentially what happened was that people who came in for a 5-day holiday ended up being in a 14-day quarantine. It adds to the cost, it adds to the unpredictability, throws things out of gear. So I think these are things that we need to be very sensitive to. And I think the most important thing, policy intervention that has been done in the recent past has been by Portugal. Because if you travel into Portugal with a PCR test, and if you contract the virus while you are there, they are offering blanket health insurance to all travelers. So if you catch it while you are there, you will be treated at their expense. And I think that is the kind of a confidence building measure that we should probably also be looking at. And I think the most important thing in this, and I cannot stress how important it is coordination is the key, because we need to coordinate between the center, between the different states, and even within the states there are different districts which seem to take a different position than the state and the rest of the country. So I think we need to coordinate very well at the domestic level as also at the international level to ensure that the traveler is assured of a safe and predictable travel. The second, and then I will call on Deep when I finish with my thing to elaborate a little bit more on this. And the second pillar that I want to talk about is strong safety and hygiene protocols. And we need to do it across all touch points, from the point that a tourist lands at the airport, to restaurants, to the hotel where he stays, to even public washrooms at sightseeing points. So I think all of these places are something that we need to have strong hygiene protocols. But I think one of the critical things that we also need to understand is that we need to ensure safety without killing the joy of the experience, because there have been some destinations which have taken it to a certain extent, which completely kills the pleasure of traveling. Because one of the things that we know is some of the restaurants in China early on had kept these glass partitions between diners. And I think if you go as a family and if each of you are, curtailed by glass partitions on 3 sides in front of you, there is no pleasure of having a meal. So I think we need to, find that golden mean where we ensure safety, but we also don't kill the experience. And I think technology has become more important now than ever before, because there are many ways by which you can do check-ins, check-outs, several things which can happen without contact, which may actually add to the efficiency of the businesses, as it were. One trend that we see all across the world, especially in the hotel industry, is that the use of plastic has increased tremendously, because everything in the hotel room, from the towels to toiletry, to the forks and knives in the restaurant, all of them are wrapped in plastic. So I think we need to also look at how to reduce that footprint that we are creating within the tourism sector and make it more sustainable. The other issue is about credibility. We all know that a few months ago, when the pandemic had started, there was an undercover operation which was done in some of the most marquee hotels in the United States by checking in and then checking into the room on 2 consecutive days, and then they sprayed it with some sort of a thing, and then they found that the remotes were not being cleaned, the surfaces were not being cleaned adequately. In some cases, even the linen was not changed. So I think these are some issues that we need to worry about, because not only should we have strong safety and hygiene protocols, we should follow them diligently. And also, as Nakul Anand once said, it's not enough to kill the virus, you also need to kill the anxiety that the traveler has when he comes into your hotel, to make sure that he's there. And I think the one critical element that we need to look at is how do we brand it, and how do we organize branding and certification to reassure the traveler. One of the things that was introduced several years ago was to put a plastic wrapper around the WC to say that this has been sanitized for your purpose. So I think we need to communicate that effectively. So I think we need to also look at how to do that. It's probably a good idea for India to introduce its own standard. I know that the WTTC is doing it, and some of the Middle Eastern countries have actually gotten on board that standard. But possibly we need to look at the cost element and see if India should need to have those standards. And then it has to be an industry-led initiative but supported by the government. I think that's something that's critical. The third pillar, and I know that Rohit is a hotelier, and I know that he's been struggling with this issue of safety and hygiene protocols for long. So I will, request him to elaborate a little bit more on it when I ask him to speak. The third pillar is about having a focused approach. One of the things that has become very clear now is that you cannot take the entire country and say that it is safe to travel now. And it's not just the case with India. There are much smaller countries which are also taking a more focused approach, which means that you select a few destinations, make them ready for tourism, and then work backwards to take whatever it takes to make sure that they deliver. And if it is successful, make sure that you succeed, and then try and ramp it up to the rest of the places. I think that way the effort of the government, the effort of the industry can well be put together, and then it can be a strong pilot project kind of a approach. And I think it's very critical to restore confidence. If we are able to open up a few destinations, do it well for a month or two, I think that restores confidence not just in the wider domestic traveling population that it is safe to travel, but also amongst international tourists that these destinations are okay to travel to. So not only is it important for domestic, but it is also important for the air bubbles that we create. For example, we have an air bubble with Germany. So if we were to tie up Goa or Kerala with Germany, and I think that opens a clear corridor, and we just need to worry about Goa or Kerala or whichever destinations that we select within them, that they deliver. And I think that is something that gives us a more practical way and a more controllable environment for us to be able to do. And increasingly, there are several countries in the world who are doing this now. Spain has opened tourism all across, but for domestic tourists. But for international tourists, they have only opened the Balearic Islands and the Canary Islands. And that gives them an opportunity to have a more controllable environment and see how that works. Of course, when the cases in the mainland Spain increased, most of the international advisories have actually given blanket advisories, which meant that it also included Canary and Balearic Islands, which is unfair, and which is why I say about that need for coordination, so that governments do not do this knee-jerk reaction which hurts destinations when it is not warranted. The other country that I have been to recently is Egypt, where again they have started two destinations, Sharm el-Sheikh and Hurghada, and both of them are again, they've gone the full Monty to ensure that the safety norms are met. And they're also considering the possibility of doing away with the PCR test to these two destinations, and to look at proxies. So I think that is the model that we need to look at. I think we need to sit down with the state governments, we need to sit down with the industry, look at where the demand is going to be, and then the willingness of the governments to walk the talk. And then I think we need to have a little bit more focused approach to handle this. To my mind, if we do this well, this could actually be a blessing in disguise, because it will ensure that most of our destinations will upgrade their Swachhata status, and I think we may have destinations which are more cleaner and which are better. And if we succeed, it will be easy for us to scale up on that success and copy that model all along. And Deepak Deva has been championing this idea for long, and I would request him to speak a little bit more when he speaks. And the fourth important element is aviation connectivity, because tourism can try whatever else, however much it wants, but unless we have aviation connectivity in place, I think it's not going to work. And if there is any sector which is more desperate than tourism to restart, I think it's the aviation sector. And I think the landscape is going to change tremendously. I think few months down the line, we're going to see an aviation sector that is very different from what it was before the pandemic began. Right now in India, domestic travel is happening, but most of it is for essential travel. I think we need to increase open up capacity to ensure that even tourists are able to travel. And if we have common health and gatekeeping protocols, that should be possible. The Honorable Civil Aviation Minister was on record recently saying that 33% of the flights are operational now, and he expects that number to move up to 50% shortly. In any case, he says by mid-November, which is Diwali, he says that almost all domestic operations and almost all international operations should be restored to the pre-pandemic levels. I think if that is the plan that is working, we need to work in tandem to ensure that tourism plays its part in helping the aviation sector and come together. One of the key strategies that I see is that destinations which have the opportunity to leverage airlines, to bundle packages, to package things and bundle the offering, which is flights, sites, and accommodation, will have a big head start. And we've already seen a lot of these Middle Eastern countries which have strong aviation companies working in that space. So I think the synergy between aviation and the tourism sector is going to be extremely critical, because when the markets open up, and especially the international markets, they're going to be opening up in bits and parts, and the whole world is going to be trying for that business. So I think it's very critical that you have a proper synergy to be able to take a compelling proposition to the marketplace. And George is, of course, working very closely on aviation, and I will also ask him for his perspective on where he sees this is going to go, and how can tourism synergize with the aviation sector. And as I've said, most of the countries are now keen to restart, but I would much rather prefer a cautious but sure-footed approach rather than doing something which is 2 steps forward and 1 step backward, because that erodes the confidence in the traveler and in the industry, and then it leaves funding and financial institutions also double guessing. So I think we need to take a conservative but a very strong, sure-footed response. And lastly, the point that I would like to make is that this pandemic also offers us, beyond the immediate pain, it also offers us a chance to hit the reset button, to see as to how we can make our businesses more sustainable, more responsible. How do we center stage communities in the product offering that we do? How do we ensure fair trade practices? There are several service providers who are now looking at achieving 0 food miles or moving towards that. Destinations which are looking at achieving zero carbon footprint. How do we create meaningful experiences for the traveler? There is a lot of talk now, and especially around aviation, about environmental costs, about factoring in environmental costs beyond the economic cost. There are elements like circular economy which are being seriously considered now for the tourism sector. So I think there are a lot of good ideas that are coming in, and I think we should not lose this opportunity to see as to how we can bring that in. And possibly, to my mind, at the end of this pandemic, we will probably see a change in the business paradigm as well. We might not see over-tourism happening the way it has happened earlier. We may not see mass tourism, which develops profitless volumes to destinations and to enterprises. I think we will be a lot more circumspect about the way we do business. So I think the challenge that we have is that we need to reorient our businesses to be more sustainable, to be more meaningful, and thereby to become more resilient. And I think we also need to put some policy instruments to support the industry and incentivize it to achieve this transformation. So that's broadly the opening remarks from me. And then I would now request Deep Kalra. I know that he's been working, he's been spending a considerable amount of time to work on health protocols and common health protocols all across the country. I would request Deep for his intervention, and then we'll touch a little bit about the health protocols. Over to you, Deep.
Sure. Thank you, Suman. Wonderful, I think, opening remarks. You really covered everything, and more importantly, I think you've given us the way forward. There is no other way we can open up tourism. It's only going to happen if we do it very carefully and taking in control all the protocols you mentioned. I will go deeper, but before anything else, I want to know when are you coming back to India to come and work with MOT? Because God knows we need you. So we really would love to have you back right now, because this is a time of crisis. And you've got this great vantage point, someone where you're seeing how different countries have dealt with it. And not all the, I think protocols will apply, but some can certainly apply. So what we believe, and and this is not so much what is good for our company at all. I think it's really what's good for the industry. Um, my fundamental belief is that if we open up without the necessary safeguards, then we are going to do, like you said, take 2 steps back, maybe 5 steps back. If we open too fast, and I saw a beautiful graph the other day, scary but beautiful, which showed about 7 countries who had opened up tourism by month on month, and how almost all of them have had to retrace what they've done. They've had to go back on certain things and actually put in place more and more restrictions because they opened up too much. You gave one example between Croatia and the Netherlands. And Croatia was one of the first countries to say everyone's welcome. We'll test you if you have a problem, etc. They were being very bold, but the reality is you can't be bold without a full plan. So I think we need a plan at 2 levels. Firstly, we need a plan at the domestic level. I will come to international, that's very, very important. But I think first thing is domestic. Today, what are customers saying? When we do surveys with our customers, and we're doing it regularly to understand what's the real concern. And clearly, the answer validates what we all think is the real concern. The real concern is fear. It's fear that I will contract this virus while I'm traveling. Now, half this panel has already traveled a lot, or maybe more than half this panel during the pandemic. And we've exchanged notes. So George and I have been exchanging notes on how the travel was. And I've told everyone it was uncomfortable but safe. So firstly, I don't think you're going to pick up the virus while you're traveling, especially during transit, because that's the time when your guard is up. And when your guard is up, you will not contract it. So if there's anything good about this virus, if you're very careful, you will not contract it. Now, you can be very careful during transit. You can enter the airport and you can say, not only will I have a mask on, but I'll have a face shield on. That means I'm not even going to be able to touch my face. And it's a double layer. And it part of it is, I think, psychological, but it definitely, I think, makes you feel more secure. I traveled Lufthansa, and I can say Lufthansa did more than what I would have even expected. So they're giving you a full kit. They're giving you a mask, they're giving you a sanitizing bottle, they're giving you a face shield, and they're giving you a PPE kind of wrap or gown, which some people want. I personally don't understand the logic of it, because I believe if you touch that and you touch yourself, you're as bad as this thing. But some people like it because then their clothes, maybe they don't need to immediately throw them in for a wash. But we know most Indians, the moment they'll reach their destination, will definitely wash them thoroughly. So, but they took great care. Throughout the flight, I could see the stewards and stewardesses very nicely coming to anyone who had lowered their mask and very politely saying, please put up your mask. And some people we know have the habit, especially older people who were traveling, they feel restricted. And very politely, they were saying, please do this. Of course, during meals, I was surprised to see people want to eat during a flight right now. It was a night flight, but to each their own. And then when I reached Europe, I realized they're coming from a different world. They're coming from a totally different world, because out here, life is very different. I won't say normal, but definitely much easier. I only transited through Frankfurt. I had to come to Zurich, where my son is based, and I was helping him find an apartment, and I'm headed back actually next week. So he's, out here, you wear masks only on public transport. When I entered the country, 150 new cases every day in the country, already now touching, I think, 380, 390, maybe 400. So it's increasing, but very calibrated approach. There's a clear protocol. If it hits this number, now you wear masks even in stores. Now you will not do dining inside restaurants, but you'll do only outside. So there's a clear protocol, and everyone's, I think, quite disciplined. 99% people are disciplined. And that's one of the biggest problems we have in India, where the self-discipline is not so great. I think people wear masks when they are being watched. The moment they're not watched, it's a little victory to remove the mask. It's like when helmets were made mandatory on scooters, and or seatbelts were made mandatory in cars. And we all remember that in India, and how people would, hate to wear them. And it's for your own good. So here it's not only for your own good, it's even for the other person's good. So I believe we've got to start a protocol of rapid antigen testing for domestic. I don't think the RT-PCR as we know it today can satisfy it because A, it's expensive. Even at the reduced cost, we're talking about 2,400 with higher volumes, might come down a little bit, though in some countries it goes up. We've come down from 4,500 to 2,400. That's quite a bit for a domestic trip. And let's not forget, not everyone is flying. But the flying protocol, I think, is the easiest to do. The rapid antigen can easily be accommodated at airports itself. The test result is 10 to 15 minutes. I was enthused to hear what you're saying about Israel. It'll be amazing if this Israeli test can come in, etc., or what they're doing at the UAE, and they have dog sniffers. But right now, what we have in India is only 3 kind of testing. We've got the RT-PCR. Actually, it takes 6 hours to get a result, or even it can be done probably in 4, but it goes batch-wise. It becomes very expensive if you have to do a shorter batch. So typically, they say overnight or 24 hours when they'll batch up everyone and do it. We have the rapid antigen test, which is 10 to 15 minutes, can be self-administered, but better done by a medical worker who can do it right at the airports itself. You create an area outside the airport, in the entrance. All our airports have enough space. Get that done. At least it's better than nothing. Yes, people say, what happens if you get a false positive? What happens if you get a false? Yes, you do. But let me tell you, it's much better than going blind. Today, my real fear, or anyone's real fear of traveling, is everyone who's entered the airport could be infected. Tomorrow, 96% are not. You still wear your mask. It doesn't give you the freedom to remove your mask. You're not inside a room with your family who you know it's okay. No. But look at what the dramatic change that you do. And the test is only a few hundred rupees now, and it can be brought down more. So I think that is a cost we will have to take up to make sure that people are safe. If we don't do that, I really fear what we are seeing in India today is still, infection still growing and growing. And yes, logarithmically, the rate of increase has come down, but the numbers are staggering. And actually, suddenly, I don't know what has happened, but I have not known personally so many people who have got infected, most of them in Gurgaon and Delhi, suddenly. Like a colleague, a few ex-colleagues, friends, I suddenly know people in my condominium, I suddenly know about 10 people who are infected. Only 1 had to go to hospital, thankfully 9 didn't. So there's even more fear. The moment that happens, you cut back. Now you've got to change the paradigm. You've got to flip the paradigm and actually say traveling could be safer. So why don't you travel out and go to one of the lovely hotels that, Rohit's company has, or anywhere else where you have a lot of space, where you have a lot of, if you can afford it, and you can get your own personal villa. So many people we know have traveled out for the weekends. The last 5 to 6 weekends have seen all resorts ex-Delhi and all good homestays ex-Delhi, Bangalore, the 2 big cities, are completely full. People in Bombay, there's still restrictions, but they are traveling out, whoever can. They're picnicking, they're trying to travel out and go towards, Lonavala, Khandala, and take picnics, whatever they can do. But if there are homestays, they're very keen to put that. So it's hotels and homestays. But we've got to again say, how is this safe? When you cross the border, what happens? See, and you touched upon a really important point, Suman. When we have different protocols in different states, and there's an e-pass, which is complicated, people are just saying, listen, this is too much headache. More than that, here's a risk of I'll be stranded for hours at the border. I'm not willing to do that during this time. And I've had friends who got stuck like that. Some have made it all the way to Himachal because they had a home address out there that they could show. But that's not the majority. The majority of people are still saying we want to go, we are happy to drive out, but give us the security. Again, at borders, I think we should be ready to accept either test results so long as they're very recent. Yes, it's not foolproof, but it is really, really better than nothing. What is the point of certifying so many labs? Why are labs certified? If the labs are certified, there were 19 earlier, I believe there are more now, then let's believe that certificate and let's take that certificate, including if you are previously infected and immune right now. So I think whether you're flying, there you need a lab right at the airport, or whether you're crossing borders, you can have this check at borders, but every state needs the same protocol, which is very critical. No quarantine in case of this. And if there is, you can, if you're driving, you'll be turned around, which is fine. If there's a problem and there's a positive and you do a rapid test in certain places, you'll be turned around. In fact, so much so the white paper which I made, and I have actually shared it. We've got a chance to share it with various people in the government. I think people have liked it. Even hotels, I think, where they have a long stay, should be testing. I think that's the only way hotels can give you comfort that, listen, firstly, our staff is checked regularly. I remember one of the big hoteliers of the country telling me that, in her hotel, her staff actually stays there, which is very interesting. If you look at it, this was in Srinagar, and this is the Jyotsna Suri's hotel, Srinagar, and she said, my staff all stays there. I said, that's a USP for you, man. You can actually use that USP and you can say, my staff doesn't go out. It's the same concept we use for part-timers or full-timers, and we say, okay, everyone's secure. But I said, you open it up and let's say, what about a guest bringing it in? So you have to test guests. Now, it's a little tricky. You can do a rapid test immediately. But if you do a RT-PCR for a 2-week stay, then you've got to follow the Maldivian model, which is till we get you the result in 24 hours, you will be constricted to your own villa. But that's a very unique proposition. Not everyone can do that. Not everyone has those kind of properties. So let's be pragmatic. I think for domestic, let's do rapid antigen testing. For international travel, I think Germany has shown the way, as have other countries. George shared with me in great detail. I remember it was the 8th of July, I think, when Germany went into this protocol of testing people at the airport. So when I landed, I was ready to be tested, and lo and behold, I didn't need to be tested in Zurich. And I knew that actually, but I wanted to get voluntary tested. And they very politely told me that, listen, to get voluntary tested, you wait 48 hours. If you wait till it actually manifests itself. So there's a little bit of a risk, and I think the way Germany is handling it, and George will tell us, is they have a follow-up, a consultation with the physician, where they check the next day, are you still doing okay? So, everyone has figured out what is the right way to do it, because if you let people leave the airport, maybe they won't do a voluntary test later. So the next best thing is what India is doing today for inbound tourists, finally, I think 8th of August, which was phenomenal, where we said, okay, if you carry a valid RT-PCR certificate of a test taken in the last 4 days, and you upload it in time, there's a little conflict in uploading it in time. It's a little, it's actually tricky, and you'll see it when you come back to the country, but you will not be quarantined. It changed the game for so many people wanting to come back. NRIs, people stranded, foreigners traveling to India for work. They're saying, thank God, because who wants to get quarantined even if you can choose your hotel? And look at the cost of that. No one's interested in that. You're coming back home or you're coming to do some work. So I think India took a very positive step, a very mature decision to do this. But as my request has been to the Honorable Ministers for Civil Aviation as well as for tourism, it's time that we get reciprocal arrangement. It's time that the countries that we at least have these so-called travel bubbles with, they should accept our tests too. If we are getting tested at the maximum, they can be like UAE and say, okay, only these 6 labs for whatever reason. But ideally, they should say any certificate that you bring will also be valid. Because this is, let's not get into the thing of saying, are people going to have fake certificates, etc., etc. So at least let's get that going with these 6 to 8 countries where we have partner arrangements right now. I know George has been trying to help me long back. We've been working on this thing, but we really need you to lean in and to give this suggestion, because I think that will change the game. And what Deepak is going to talk about and what's important for Rohit is only then will people have the confidence we can come and go. Otherwise, it's very restrictive. Today, I don't know too many people who will want to travel to India right now. I'm being very frank. When they hear these numbers in 75 and 78 and 80,000, and they just shudder and they say, why? But is there a bubble arrangement with Goa? Perhaps, but then we've got to seal up Goa and we've got to say, can we do that? Someone had very interesting ideas along your lines, but then people have to be said, okay, you'll come to this hotel, you'll stay here, you'll get tested, possible, but it doesn't solve for the rest of the country. We've got such an amazing country. Let's not, throw the baby out with the bathwater out here. That's what we have to do to tourism. Just because things are still bad, and the reality is the infection is here for long. It's not going away overnight for sure. The vaccine will be when it will be. Till that time, you said we've got to move on. This industry contributes 10% of GDP. There is no way we can let it go. We've got to figure out the alternatives, the safer way of traveling today. It will be a different kind of trip. It will be out in nature, a little constrained. as I call it, your social bubble becomes your travel bubble. You're happy to meet these few 2-3 families or your extended family, travel with them, have a nice time with them, be out there in the outdoors. And the weather's going to change and get much better now in India. So we have an opportunity for the next 6 months where we can actually do a lot of outdoor stuff, which will not be possible in the summer again. So I think that's broadly, what I wanted to share. I'm cognizant of time. I know we have many, many interesting points to be made. So I'll stop here. And if there's time, we can do Q&A later. Thank you.
Thank you, Deep. That was very insightful.